The Malthari cruiser Eclipse of Dawn drifted through the void, its bioluminescent hull shimmering like frozen lightning against the black. Its flowing organic architecture pulsed with soft violet energy, the atmospheric condensers along its spine exhaling streams of ionized gas. Beautiful, efficient, the pinnacle of a civilization that had mastered the stars before humanity had even crawled from their primordial oceans. Commander Malvar stood at the observation deck, his crystalline fingers tracing the translucent surface of the display. The human colony below was a flicker of crude heat signatures, their structures blocky and inelegant compared to the wind-carved spires of Malthari cities. A backwater, a footnote, and yet it was theirs. They call it Eden's Reach. The Lowland murmured beside him, the scientist's voice a whisper of static through his vocal modulator. A terraforming outpost, primitive, but persistent. Malvar's mandibles twitched in amusement. Persistent was one word for it. The humans had no right to be here, this deep in the scattered veil, a region the Malthari had long claimed as their own. But they had come anyway, digging into dead rock with their blunt tools, coaxing life from barren soil like stubborn weeds breaking through stone. He had expected resistance, a fight. Instead, they found silence. The orbital scans showed no warships, no defensive grids, just a single, half-finished terraforming spire jutting from the planet's surface like a broken tooth. And beside it, the prize, a human terraformer, its blocky frame humming with crude but effective atmospheric processors. They left it unguarded, the Lowland observed, his ocular lenses narrowing. A mistake. Malvar exhaled, the sound a ripple of harmonic resonance, or a trap, but the scans revealed nothing. No hidden signatures, no dormant weapons, just the terraformer, pulsing softly, its system still active. Waiting, the decision was made without ceremony. The Malthari did not steal, they reclaimed. This was their space, their right. The humans would learn their place. A detachment of enforcers descended in sleek, silver dropships, their forms blurring against the planet's thin atmosphere. The colony was empty, its streets hollow, its buildings dark. Only the terraformer remained, its access panels unlocked, its system still whispering to the empty air. The Lowland approached it first, his talons skimming the human interface with disdain. Their technology was so loud, blinking lights, exposed wiring, the stench of overheated alloys, no elegance, no grace. He paused. The machine was warm, not just operational, alive. A shiver crawled through his neural filaments. "Commander," he transmitted, his voice tighter than before. "This device, it is not merely a terraformer." Malvar's response was a pulse of irritation. Explained, the Lowland hesitated. The readings were wrong. The energy signatures didn't match standard human atmospheric processors. There was something beneath the surface, something older. Then the terraformer spoke, not in words, not in any language the Malthari could parse. A deep resonant frequency shuddered through the ground, vibrating through the Lowland's exoskeleton, rattling the crystalline structures of his body. The enforcers staggered, their equilibrium disrupted, their sensory arrays overloading with the sheer wrongness of the sound. The sky rippled. Malvar, watching from orbit, saw it first. The planet's thin atmosphere warped, bending like liquid around the terraformer's spire. The human machine wasn't just altering the environment. It was calling something, and something was answering. The Lowland's claws scraped against the terraformer's outer casing as he staggered back, his bioluminescent nodes flickering erratically. The sound, no, the vibration, wasn't just in the air. It was inside him, resonating through the delicate lattice of his crystalline biology, sending fractures spiderwebbing through his neural pathways. His secondary heart stuttered, and for the first time in his long academic career, the Lowland felt something his species had no word for. Around him, the Malthari enforcers collapsed, their sleek, silver-purple armor useless against the terraformer's song. Their sensory tendrils writhed, their equilibrium shattered, their bodies convulsing as the frequency pulled at them, as if trying to reshape their very molecular structure. The lowland's data pad shattered in his grip, its delicate aerogel screen dissolving into iridescent dust above. The sky bent. Malvar's command vessel, the Eclipse Sovereign, registered the anomaly before his crew could even process it. The planet's atmosphere, thin, barely breathable by Malthari standards, suddenly moved, not as gas, not as wind. The clouds coiled like muscle, the horizon flexing like a living membrane. The terraformer's spire pulsed, its core emitting a light that wasn't light, a deep, ultraviolet thrum that bypassed optics entirely and seared directly into the brain. "Hi, Commander." The sensor officer's voice was a distorted warble, their crystalline form vibrating in sync with the planet's unnatural resonance. The human device, it's generating a gravitational anomaly. Malvar's claws tightened around the armrests of his command throne. The readings were impossible. The terraformer wasn't just altering the atmosphere, it was rewriting it. The radiation signatures matched nothing in the Malthari archives. No known technology, no natural phenomenon. And then the ground split. The lowland barely had time to register the fissure before it yawned open beneath him. A jagged maw of blackened rock, and something else. Something that glistened wetly in the terraformer's eerie glow. The enforcers screamed as the earth swallowed them whole, their bioluminescence snuffing out in an instant. The lowland scrambled back, his exoskeleton cracking under the strain. His mind raced through every scrap of data he had on human technology. Terraformers were supposed to be tools, slow, methodical, predictable. They seeded atmospheres, adjusted temperatures, coaxed life from barren rock. This was not that. This was something alive. And it was waking up. Aboard the Eclipse Sovereign, Malvar's tactical display flickered, then dissolved into static. The terraformer's signal was spreading, its frequency bleeding into the ship systems. The bridge lights dimmed, the crystalline panels humming in dissonant harmony with the planet below. "Shut it down," Malvar growled. "We can't," the tech officer stammered. "The signal isn't electronic. It's biological, it's interfacing with our neural architecture directly." Malvar's secondary eyelids snapped shut for a fraction of a second. A reflex, a primal response to something his species had never needed to fear before. Contamination. The humans hadn't just built a machine. They had built a symbiote, a thing that didn't just reshape worlds, it bonded with them. And now it was bonding with them. On the surface, the lowland's claws found purchase on a jagged outcrop as the ground continued to heave. The terraformer's spire had begun to melt, its metallic shell sloughing away like dead skin, revealing something pulsing and veined beneath. The lowland's scientific curiosity warred with a deeper, older instinct run. But then he saw it, embedded in the terraformer's core, half buried in the writhing mass of organic circuitry, was a human inscription, faded, nearly eroded. "Property of Earth Defense Force. Do not attempt to decommission without authorization." And beneath it, scrawled in hasty, blood-rusted letters, "It remembers." The lowland's mind reeled. This wasn't a terraformer, it was a weapon. And it had just recognized the Malthari as a threat. The last thing he saw before the earth swallowed him whole was the sky peeling back, revealing something vast and dark and hungry beyond it. Something the humans had left behind. The lowland's scream was swallowed by the earth as it closed over him like a living maw. His last thought was of the sky, how it had rippled as though reality itself were a thin film stretched over something far older and far more terrible. Then darkness. When consciousness returned, it came with the scent of iron and ozone, the taste of blood thick in his mouth. His body ached, as if every bone had been shattered and hastily reassembled. The lowland forced his primary eyes open, his secondary eyelids flicking away grit. He was not dead. That, he decided, might have been preferable. The chamber around him pulsed with a sickly violet light, the walls not stone but something organic, veined with threads of bioluminescent circuitry. The air hummed with energy, the same streaming purple, white currents that powered Malthari technology, but twisted, wrong, as though the energy itself had been infected. And then there were the voices, whispers. At first, fragments of language that skittered just beyond comprehension. The Lowlands translator implant sparked in his skull, overloading as it tried and failed to parse the sounds. Human speech, but not any dialect on record. This was something older, something buried. A shadow moved at the edge of his vision. The Lowland's spines flared in instinctive alarm, his claws scraping against the slick floor as he tried to push himself upright. The figure that stepped into the light was not Malthari. It was human. Or at least, it had been. The thing wore the tattered remains of an Earth Defense Force uniform, the fabric fused to its flesh in places, its skin mottled with metallic scarring. Its eyes were the worst, no whites, no pupils, just pits of swirling darkness that seemed to drink in the light. It tilted its head, studying him with an expression that might have been curiosity or hunger. First contact protocol, it rasped, the words glitching through multiple languages before settling into halting Malthari. Designation, Sergeant Marcus Jackson, Earth Defense Force, Faith Mechanized Division. The Lowland's breath caught. That name was in the records, a human soldier, listed as Mia during the scouring of Kepler. Faith, that had been decades ago. The thing that had been Marcus Jackson smiled, its teeth too sharp, too many. You shouldn't have touched the terraformer, it said. And then the wall screamed. The chamber convulsed, the organic metal twisting like muscle, tendrils of liquid alloy erupting from the floor to wrap around Thalolan's limbs. He thrashed, his claws scoring uselessly against the living metal as it dragged him deeper into the structure. The last thing he saw before the darkness took him again was the human, no, the thing, watching him with those endless black eyes, and the words it whispered in a voice that was not its own. Welcome to the garden. Above the surface, Malvar's command. Spire shuddered as the seismic readings spiked off the charts. The entire valley was moving, the earth buckling as though something vast were waking beneath it. Report, he barked, his talons digging into the armrests of his command throne. The sensor officer's frills were clamped tight in fear. The terraformer, it's not just reactivating, Commander, it's transforming. The holodisplay flickered, then resolved into a nightmare. The spire was gone. In its place, a massive pulsing mass of organic metal rose from the earth, its surface writhing with tendrils of violet energy. And at its peak, where the control nexus should have been, a single humanoid figure stood, silhouetted against the bleeding sky. Malvar's blood ran cold, because the figure was looking right at him, and it was smiling. The ground beneath the Malthari command spire breathed. Malvar had seen war on a dozen worlds, had commanded orbital bombardments that turned continents to glass, had watched as entire species knelt before the Empire's might. But this was different. This was not destruction. This was awakening. The terraformer's roots, buried deep beneath the valley, were no longer dormant. They pulsed with a rhythm like a heartbeat, veins of bioluminescent energy threading through the soil, spreading outward in fractal patterns. The earth itself seemed to flex, heaving upward in slow, deliberate waves. Crystalline structures that had not been there moments before, erupted from the ground like the bones of some long-buried leviathan. Thalolan's talons trembled as he adjusted his scanner. The readings made no sense. The terraformer's energy signature was no longer the controlled, elegant flow of Malthari technology. It had mutated, twisted into something hungry. The power coursing through it wasn't just sustaining the machine, it was feeding it, and it was growing. Malvar's comms crackled to life, the voices of his ground teams frantic, distorted. Commander, the perimeter is static. Then a scream. It's in the walls. The walls are. The transmission cut off with a wet organic crunch. The holodisplay flickered again, zooming in on the figure atop the terraformer. It was humanoid, yes, but wrong. Its silhouette was too elongated, its movements too fluid, as if its bones were not quite solid, and its face, Malvar's frills flattened against his skull. The thing was wearing Colonel Felger's face, but the eyes, those were not hers. They were black, depthless, reflecting no light, only the swirling auroras of the terraformer's energy. And when it spoke, its voice was a chorus, layered with the whispers of 1,000 others. "You took our tools," it said, "but you never asked what we built them for." The Lowland scanner beeped wildly. He stared at the data, his mind refusing to accept what he was seeing. The terraformer wasn't just reshaping the land, it was rewriting it. The soil composition was changing at a molecular level, the air thickening with spores that shouldn't exist on this world. And beneath it all, something vast was stirring. Something that had been sleeping. Something the humans had put there. Malvar's grip on the armrests tightened until the metal groaned. He had thought the terraformer was a machine, a tool. He had been wrong. The humans hadn't built it to tame worlds. They had built it to prepare them, and now it was calling home. The air tasted wrong. Thelowland's tongue pressed against the roof of his mouth, the metallic tang of ionization thick enough to choke on. The terraformer's energy pulsed through the ground like a slow, deliberate heartbeat, sending tremors through the Malthari command hub. The walls, smooth, flowing curves of aerogel alloy, should have been impervious to vibration. Yet they shivered now, crystalline panels flickering as if recoiling from the unseen force spreading beneath them. Malvar stood frozen at the observation deck, his silver, veined fingers digging into the railing. The view outside was no longer the barren wasteland they had first surveyed. The earth had changed where there had been cracked, lifeless plains. Now there were veins, thick, black, and pulsing, spreading like roots beneath the surface. The terraformer's central spire hummed, its bioluminescent panels flaring in erratic bursts, casting jagged shadows across the landscape. And the sound, it wasn't mechanical. It wasn't even organic. It was something in between, a low resonant frequency that bypassed the ears entirely and vibrated in the marrow of the bones. The Lowland scanner had long since given up trying to categorize it. The readings spiked into nonsense, the screen flickering with warnings in a language even the Malthari database didn't recognize. "High Commander," the Lowland whispered, his voice barely audible over the growing hum. "The terraformer isn't just altering the planet. It's communicating." Malvar finished, his voice hollow. The realization settled over them like a suffocating fog. The humans hadn't merely built a machine to reshape worlds. They had built a beacon, and something was answering. Sergeant Marcus Jackson exhaled slowly, his breath fogging the inside of his helmet. The Malthari had confiscated their gear, stripped them of weapons, locked them in a containment cell lined with shimmering violet force fields. But they hadn't taken his comms, because they hadn't recognized it for what it was. The tiny device embedded in his molar buzzed once, a signal, a confirmation. Colonel Felger didn't react outwardly, her posture still rigid, her face unreadable beneath her visor. But Marcus knew they all did. The call had been heard. The first tremor nearly knocked Thelowland off his feet. The ground rippled, not in the way of an earthquake, but like something vast shifting beneath the crust. The terraformer's spire pulsed brighter, its energy streams twisting into spirals that arced into the sky, ionizing the atmosphere in streaks of violet and white. Then the earth split. A chasm yawned open, swallowing entire sections of the Malthari outpost in an instant. The Lowland barely had time to register the sight before the scanner in his hands screamed, a sound he had never heard it make before. The reading spiked off the charts. Something was rising from the depths. Something alive. Malvar's breath caught in his throat as the first tendril breached the surface. A massive, segmented limb, black as voidstone, glistening with an oily sheen. It moved with eerie precision, coiling around the terraformer's base like a lover's embrace. The humans hadn't built the terraformer to reshape the world. They had built it to wake what slept beneath it, and now it was awake. The thing that rose from the chasm was not a machine. It was not a beast. It was something older. Thalolan's scanner shattered in his grip, its crystalline display overloading as it tried, and failed, to categorize the entity now coiling around the terraformer's spire. The readings made no sense. Biomass signatures flickered between organic and synthetic. Energy outputs pulsed like a heartbeat, and gravitational distortions warped the air around its limbs. The Malthari scientist staggered back, his mind scrambling for logic where none existed. This was not a weapon. This was symbiosis. Malvar's command aura flickered, his usually immaculate composure fracturing as the ground beneath him moved. The segmented limb, thick as a warship's hull, flexed, and the terraformer's energy streams changed. No longer erratic, no longer wild, they pulsed in unison with the thing beneath, violet-white currents flowing into its obsidian flesh like nourishment. The humans had not just tamed this planet, they had partnered with it. Across the battlefield, Colonel Felger stood motionless, her gaze locked on the awakening Leviathan. There was no fear in her expression, only recognition, only respect. Sergeant Jackson exhaled sharply beside her, his grip tightening on his rifle. Not in preparation to fight, but in instinctive reverence. The Malthari had assumed the terraformer was a tool. They were wrong, it was a conduit. The first tremors had been a warning. The chasm, an invitation. Now, the entity fully emerged, its true scale impossible to comprehend. A vast, segmented mass of interlocking plates, each one etched with patterns that mirrored the terraformer's own energy channels. Bioluminescent veins pulsed beneath its armored hide, cycling the same violet, white energy that powered the spire. Thalolan's mind raced. This was no accident. The terraformer's design, its flowing organic tech, its crystalline matrices, wasn't just inspired by Malthari aesthetics. It was mimicry, a deliberate echo of their own architecture, refined over decades of observation. The humans had not stolen Malthari technology. They had studied it, and then they had given it to something else. Malvar's warriors opened fire, their plasma lances carving searing arcs through the air. The beams struck the entity's hide and sank in, absorbed without so much as a scorch mark. The creature did not retaliate. It did not need to. The terraformer pulsed again, and the very atmosphere ripped with discharge. A Malthari dropship, hovering too close, shuddered as its energy core destabilized. The ionization wave hit it like a tidal force, sending it spiraling into the chasm, swallowed whole. Felger finally moved, stepping forward, her hand raised, not in surrender, but in greeting. The entity's massive limb shifted, a single segmented appendage extending toward her, stopping just short of contact. Jackson's breath caught. The colonel didn't flinch. Not a roar, not a scream. Deep, resonant, vibrating through the bones of every living thing on the battlefield. The terraformer's spire flared one final time, and the entity sang back. Its bioluminescence flaring in perfect synchronization. The message was unmistakable. This was not a war. This was a reunion. Malvar's blood ran cold. The humans hadn't just survived their harsh world. They had befriended the monster beneath it. And now, the Malthari had woken it too. The chime resonated through the battlefield like a seismic bell, its vibrations warping the very air. Malvar's crystalline exoskeleton hummed in dissonance, his sensory pits overloading with the sheer wrongness of the sound. It wasn't Malthari, it wasn't even human. It was something older. The terraformer's spire pulsed again, its bioluminescent veins flaring in cascading waves of violet and gold. The towering entity, no, not an entity, a being shifted, its segmented limbs retracting slightly, as if reassessing the battlefield. The Malthari dropship's wreckage still smoldered in the chasm below, its energy core reduced to a fading ember in the shadow of this colossus. Malvar's tactical display flickered, his neural interface struggling to parse the data. The humans weren't retreating. They weren't even reacting like prey should. Colonel Felger stood motionless, her hand still outstretched, her expression unreadable beneath her visor. But her posture, that spoke volumes. She wasn't afraid. She was waiting. Then the ground moved. At first, Malvar thought it was another seismic shift, another aftershock from the terraformer's activation. But this was different. The earth didn't crack. It bloomed. Tendrils of something dark and fibrous erupted from the soil, coiling around Malthari infantry like living vines. Soldiers screamed as their crystalline armor dissolved, the organic plating eaten away in seconds. The Lowland's voice crackled over the comms, shrill with panic. "Captain, their biomass. It's not just adapting, it's assimilating." Malvar barely heard him. His gaze locked onto the terraformer's base, where the human soldiers, Jackson among them, stood utterly untouched. The vines avoided them. No, not avoided, recognized. A terrible understanding dawned. The humans hadn't just befriended the monster beneath their world. They had integrated with it. The terraformer wasn't a weapon. It was a symbiote. And now it was hungry. The Lowland's next transmission was a garbled shriek before cutting off entirely. Malvar's tactical feed dissolved into static, his HUD painting the battlefield in frantic red warnings. The vines weren't just attacking, they were reconfiguring. Malthari tech, designed to harness atmospheric energy, was being repurposed before his eyes. Its purple, white ionization streams hijacked, rerouted into the terraformer's pulsating core. Felger finally lowered her hand. The entity answered. Its massive form shuddered, then unfolded, revealing a lattice of photosynthetic membranes beneath its armored segments. They rippled, absorbing the very light around them, and the battlefield darkened, not from shadow. From consumption, Malvar's breath caught. This wasn't warfare. This was photosynthesis turned predator, and humanity had weaponized it. The last thing he saw before the vines reached him was Jackson, just a silhouette against the terraformer's glow, tilting his head in something that might have been pity. Recognition, the darkness wasn't an absence. It was a presence. Malvar's tactical visor flickered, its crystalline display struggling to parse the data flooding in. The terraformer's photosynthetic lattice had swallowed the battlefield's light, not by extinguishing it, but by digesting it, converting photons into something denser, hungrier. The air itself thickened, charged with an energy that made his silver-carved armor vibrate like a struck tuning fork. Around him, Malthari soldiers stumbled, their elegant, wind-swept rifles sputtering as the ionization streams powering them were siphoned away. The terraformer didn't just consume, it reclaimed. Malvar's breath came in short, sharp bursts. He had commanded fleets that scoured atmospheres into submission, had overseen the taming of rogue planets with nothing but the precision of Malthari atmospheric condensers. But this was alive, not in the way of their bioluminescent tech, with its graceful, flowing energy currents. No, this was something older, wilder. The vines lashed out again, not as mindless tendrils, but as limbs, each movement calculated, predatory. They coiled around a Malthari heavy gunner, and for a heartbeat, Malvar thought the soldier might resist. Then the vines pulsed, and the soldier's armor dissolved, its aerogel structure unraveling like thread in a storm. The soldier didn't scream. He liquefied. Malvar's stomach turned. This wasn't warfare. It was harvesting. A hand clamped onto his shoulder. Thalolan, her violet eyes wide behind her translucent faceplate. "Commander, the energy signatures." Her voice was raw, stripped of its usual scientific detachment. "It's not just absorbing our tech, it's learning from it." Malvar followed her gaze to the terraformer's core. The once familiar Malthari energy streams, those elegant ribbons of purple, white ionization, now twisted in unnatural patterns, their flows redirected into the machine's pulsating heart. The terraformer wasn't just stealing their power. It was evolving. A shadow moved at the edge of his vision. Felger. She stood at the center of the chaos, untouched, her posture relaxed in a way that sent a primal warning screaming through Malvar's nerves. Humans didn't relax in battle. Not unless they knew they'd dead already won. Jackson appeared beside her, his rifle slung casually over one shoulder. He wasn't even wearing a helmet. The air here should have been toxic, the radiation levels fatal, but the humans breathed it like it was nothing, because to them, it was. Malvar's mind raced. The reports had been clear. Humans were fragile, short-lived, bound by crude biology. But the thing unfolding before him was neither crude nor bound. It was adapting, using Malthari tech, Malthari energy, to fuel something far older than either of their civilizations. The terraformer shuddered, and a new sound cut through the battlefield. A deep, resonant hum, like a planet's core singing. The lattice above them flexed, and for the first time, Malvar saw the truth. It wasn't a machine, it was an ecosystem, and humanity hadn't built it, they had bred it. The lowland's voice was barely a whisper. "Commander, we have to fall back." Malvar didn't answer. His eyes were locked on Felger, on the way she tilted her head, just slightly, as if listening to a voice only she could hear. Then she smiled, and the terraformer bloomed. Vines erupted from the ground in a storm of grasping tendrils, their surfaces now studded with crystalline growths that mirrored Malthari tech, but sharper, hungrier. They moved with purpose, not just attacking, but hurting, driving the Malthari forces into tightening circles. Malvar's tactical feed screamed with panic, his soldiers' signals vanishing one by one. He had come here to confiscate a tool. Instead, he had awakened a predator, and it was calling home. The terraformer's song deepened, vibrating through the bones of the Malthari soldiers, resonating in the hollow spaces of their crystalline armor. Malvar's tactical display flickered, not from interference, but from the sheer wrongness of the signal. The human machine, no, the human organism, was broadcasting on frequencies that shouldn't exist, pulsing in rhythms that made his neural interface ache. The vines weren't just attacking, they were learning. Every severed tendril twitched, regrew, its new form sharper, its movements more precise. The crystalline growths along their lengths pulsed with stolen energy, their jagged edges reflecting the Malthari's own aurora. Hued weaponry, but twisted, repurposed. The terraformer wasn't just mimicking their technology, it was evolving past it. The lowland's hands trembled as he adjusted his scanner. "Commander, the biomass. It's adapting to our suppression fields. It's integrating them." His voice cracked. Like an immune response, Malvar didn't need the data. He could see it in the way the vines moved, now no longer wild, but tactical, coordinated. They coiled around Malthari energy projectors, their surfaces rippling as they absorbed the blasts, metabolizing the plasma into something darker, hungrier. And Felger. She stood at the heart of it all, her boots rooted in the churning soil, her eyes half lidded as if listening to a whisper only she could hear. The scar along her jaw gleamed under the eerie light of the terraformer's core, a jagged reminder of battles fought long before the Malthari had ever set foot in this system. Malvar's mandibles tightened. This wasn't a war. This was harvesting. A scream tore through the comms. One of his lieutenants, caught in a nest of barbed tendrils. The vines didn't crush. They infiltrated, threading through armor seams, seeking the soft, wet warmth beneath. The feed cut abruptly, replaced by a wet, organic static. Then, from the chaos, a single human voice. Sergeant Jackson. He wasn't running, wasn't even fighting, just standing there, rifle slung across his back, watching as the terraformer worked. His face was unreadable, not triumphant, not horrified, just accepting. Malvar's blood ran cold. The humans hadn't just survived their own planet's brutality. They had weaponized it. And now, the Malthari were finally understanding the oldest, simplest truth of humanity. They didn't conquer worlds. They infected them. The Terraformer's song swelled, and the ground beneath Malvar's feet shuddered, not in protest, but in recognition somewhere. Deep in the writhing biomass, something answered. The ground moved. Malvar staggered, his crystalline armor plates scraping against each other as the earth beneath him buckled like living flesh. The air itself had changed, thick with spores, with the electric tang of ozone and chlorophyll, the scent of a world waking up. Around him, the Malthari forces were dissolving into chaos. Bioluminescent panels flickered erratically across their armor, their sleek, wind-carved weaponry useless against the writhing tide of biomass rising from the soil. He had seen human war machines before, plasma cannons, railguns, even their crude fission devices. This was something else. This was alive. The Terraformer's song had not stopped. It had deepened, resonating through the ground, through the air, through the very bones of the planet. The vines that had erupted moments ago were no longer mere tendrils. They were arteries, pulsing with a deep verdant luminescence, branching outward in fractal patterns. Where they touched Malthari technology, the sleek purple. White alloys rusted, corroding in seconds, as if time itself had accelerated around them. The flowing energy currents of their weapons sputtered and died, choked by creeping moss that bloomed across their surfaces. Malvar's breath came in short, panicked bursts. His command interface was glitching, his tactical feed dissolving into static. He could hear Thalolan screaming over the comms, not in pain, but in horror. As the scientists' scanners registered the truth, the Terraformer wasn't just reshaping the land, it was rewriting it. Sergeant Jackson hadn't moved. He stood at the heart of the storm, his boots rooted in the shifting earth, his face illuminated by the eerie glow of the Terraformer's core. His expression was still unreadable, but Malvar saw it now, the quiet, terrible certainty in his eyes. This was not a weapon humans had built. This was a weapon they had bred. A shudder passed through the ground, deeper this time. The soil split, and something rose, a vast, fibrous mass, its surface glistening with sap, its structure too symmetrical to be natural. It unfurled like a flower, revealing a central node, a throbbing, emerald heart. And then it spoke, not in words, not in sound. The air itself turned green. Spores erupted in a swirling storm, clinging to armor, to skin, to the very air filters of the Malthari helmets. Malvar's HUD flashed warnings, biological contamination detected. But it was too late. The spores were already inside, threading through filtration systems, infiltrating lungs. He coughed, and his throat burned, not with poison. Thalolan's voice crackled over the comms, half mad with revelation. It's not killing us. Malvar understood. The Terraformer wasn't here to destroy. It was here to convert. The first scream came from his left, a warrior clawing at his chest as his veins darkened, as his skin greened, as something inside him shifted. His armor cracked, not from force, but from the pressure of something growing beneath it. Malvar turned, his own limbs growing heavy, his thoughts sluggish. His blood felt thick, syrupy, his vision blurred at the edges, tinted emerald. Jackson finally moved. He stepped forward, his boots sinking slightly into the softened earth, and looked down at Malvar with something almost like pity. "You took it from us," he said, his voice barely audible over the Terraformer's song. "But it was never yours to hold." The last thing Malvar saw before the green swallowed him whole was the sky, streaked with auroras, beautiful and terrible, as the planet itself breathed in harmony with the machine. And then the world was gone, replaced by something new. The first thing Malvar felt was warmth, not the searing heat of plasma fire, nor the sterile chill of cryo, sleep, but something deeper. Older, the warmth of sunlight filtered through leaves, the pulse of life beneath his fingertips. His eyes opened to a sky he did not recognize. It was green, not the sickly, irradiated green of a dying world, nor the artificial glow of Malthari atmospheric processors. This was living green, a canopy of leaves so vast they blotted out the stars, swaying in a wind that carried the scent of wet earth and blooming things. The air itself hummed, thick with the resonance of the terraformer's song, now woven into the planet's very bones. Malvar tried to move. His body responded, but differently. His limbs felt heavier, yet stronger. His skin, once the pale violet of his people, was now dappled with patches of emerald, veins tracing luminous paths beneath the surface. He flexed his fingers, watched as tiny filaments of moss curled around his claws, as if greeting him. The thought should have horrified him. Instead, it filled him with a quiet, terrifying awe. Around him, the ruins of the Malthari outpost had been swallowed by the planet's transformation. Towering spires of bioluminescent fungi spiraled where command centers once stood. The sleek, crystalline alloys of their ships had grown into the earth, their surfaces now veined with pulsing capillaries of purple, white energy, no longer Malthari tech, but something else. Something that sang in harmony with the terraformer's will. And then he saw them, the humans. They moved through the transformed landscape like ghosts, their forms half hidden by the shifting foliage. Colonel Felger stood at the edge of a clearing, her uniform now fused with living vines, her eyes reflecting the same eerie glow as the terraformer's core. Sergeant Jackson knelt beside a fallen Malthari warrior. No, not fallen, changing. His hands pressed against the warrior's chest, where the first tendrils of new growth spiraled outward. Malvar stumbled forward. His voice, when it came, was raw. "What have you done?" Felger turned. There was no triumph in her gaze. Only exhaustion, only sorrow. "What we always do," she said softly. "We survived." The truth crashed over him like a tidal wave. The terraformer had never been a weapon, not in the way the Malthari understood. It was a seed, a fragment of Earth's defiance, its relentless will to endure. It did not conquer. It adapted, absorbing, integrating, rewriting the very fabric of the world to fit its needs. And now, it had rewritten them. Malvar looked down at his hands again. The emerald patterns pulsed in time with his heartbeat. He could feel the planet beneath him, its breath synced to his own. The terror should have been overwhelming, but it wasn't, because beneath the fear, beneath the shock of his own transformation, something else stirred. The Malthari had sought to dominate the galaxy, to bend it to their will. But the humans had listened. They had learned the language of worlds, and in doing so, they had become something more, something unstoppable. Thalolan emerged from the undergrowth, her once pristine robes now threaded with glowing mycelium. Her eyes, wide with wonder, met Malvar's. "Do you feel it?" she whispered. The planet was awake, and it remembered them. Far above, the auroras shimmered, no longer the cold artificial hues of Malthari technology, but the vibrant, living colors of a world reborn. The terraformer's song had faded into the wind, its purpose fulfilled. It had called home, and home had answered. Malvar closed his eyes and let the green take him. The sky burned gold, not with fire, not with the sterile glow of Malthari energy grids, but with light. True, unfiltered sunlight, spilling through the canopy in liquid waves, dappling the forest floor in patterns that shifted like living ink. Malvar stood at the edge of the clearing, his bare feet buried in the warm soil, his breath synced to the slow, rhythmic pulse of the world beneath him. The air smelled different now, not the sterile tang of recycled atmosphere, not the acrid bite of ionized machinery, but green, rich and wet and humming with life. The mycelial threads that had woven through his veins pulsed in time with the roots beneath his feet. A silent conversation, He no longer needed to translate. He understood. Behind him, the remnants of the Malthari fleet lay dormant, their once gleaming hulls now cradled in vines, their bioluminescent panels darkened. The great terraformer spire, now a skeletal monument, stood half swallowed by the forest, its crystalline surfaces frosted with moss. The planet had not destroyed them, it had absorbed them. Thalolan moved beside him, her fingers brushing his. Her skin was no longer the pale violet of their people, but a deep, mottled emerald, threaded with faint luminescence. She smiled, and when she spoke, her voice was not just her own, but layered with the whisper of leaves, the murmur of distant rivers. "They will come," she said. Malvar nodded. The Malthari High Command would not accept silence. They would send more ships, more weapons, more of their cold, unyielding logic to reclaim what they had lost. But the humans had taught this world something new. The forest exhaled around them, a slow, deliberate breath. The roots shifted, the mycelium pulsed. Somewhere in the canopy, a creature, neither Malthari nor Earth, born, but something else, chirped a question into the wind. Malvar tilted his head back, letting the sunlight wash over his face. Let them come. The planet was waiting.